Lewis Hamilton's prayers answered as Ferrari show threatening pace on the opening day of the British Grand Prix as Lando Norris tops the timesheets at Silverstone. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, a very interesting opening day at Silverstone. A lot of things happened which perhaps weren't expected. You're currently shielding yourself because, as you can explain in a second, the wind has really picked up. That actually caught out a couple of drivers in second practice. Carlos Sainz had a spin on the XL Luffield caused by a huge gust, but at the end of the day, Lando Norris just over 2/10 clear in second practice, picking up from where he left off in Austria.
Absolutely. Oops, I've started with an absolutely, just like our good friend Sam Coop. Anybody who watches our podcasts know that Mr. Coop is known as Absolutely Sam Coop because he often uses the word absolutely. Anyway, yes, moving swiftly on. As people can see, I don't have a wonderful backdrop this evening. Sorry to disappoint all those who might tune in to see where Parks is standing. Yes, as you say, Nick, it has been a really windy day. Huge gusts. I can see some flags to my left-hand side that are really fluttering. And I've had to find quite a sheltered area. Even now, stood in this spot where I am, it's still blowing the odd gust here and there. And I'm having to hold the tripod stand on which my phone is currently situated because just in case one of those gusts, just like it did with Carlos Sainz in his Williams, suddenly tips over my phone and tripod. So yes, really exposed conditions. It is an old airfield at the end of the day. And despite the numerous grandstands and everything else that has been built up around this circuit, it is a very exposed area of flat land. And that naturally has an effect on the drivers, the cars when they're on track, as we saw with Carlos Sainz in particular, that huge snap of wind sending him into a complete 360-degree spin. He was okay after that, but yes, it's that kind of circuit that lends itself to these conditions. And at any given time, a driver can be caught out by it. On track, really good day for Lando Norris, as you say, pretty much ending Friday where he ended Saturday, just 5 days ago in the Austrian Grand Prix, on top, looking good. The really good pace set in that McLaren. Also, he's looking good on long run pace as well from the few laps we saw at the start of FP2 on the medium and the few laps we saw towards the end of it as well. On the soft rubber, he was the quickest from the Ferraris. We saw Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton second and third. Lewis had surprised to a certain extent by being top of the timesheet in FP1. However, the caveat to FP2 is that neither Charles nor Lewis managed to get a good opening lap on the softs, and their times were actually set on a second lap on that set of soft tyres. How close they would have been to Lando, not quite sure. Certainly a lot closer than the 2/10 and the 3/10 that both Charles and Lewis were respectively to Lando. But nevertheless, Ferrari looking good at this stage. They've got something in reserve as well, but you do feel this is looking like it could be most definitely Lando Norris potentially on pole position if he can hook up one of those solid laps like we saw in Austria just a week ago.
But that was the big surprise, wasn't it? Ferrari's pace. Nobody kind of knew, would it be a good weekend for Ferrari? Would it not? The initial indicators and what was probably their best Friday of the season is that Ferrari, both Charles and Lewis, will be there in the fight for both pole and victory, believe it or not, come Sunday. Zach Brown, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, all stating that yes, Ferrari are a big threat this weekend.
They've got good race pace as well. It looks like the floor, the new floor that they placed on that SF25 for the Austrian Grand Prix, we got an indicator of it back in Spielberg, as mentioned, with second and fourth on the grid for Charles and Lewis, respectively, back then. Race pace, yes, it was okay. It was nowhere near the race pace of the McLarens, as we saw. However, early race pace indicators are that Ferrari is looking quite strong for this particular circuit. As you say, Zach Brown in particular suggesting that Ferrari is going to be quite a threat to those McLarens over the course of the entire weekend, not just in qualifying, but potentially going into the Grand Prix as well. If that's the case, you and I, Nick, could be on for a good haul of points for our
Fingers
predictions,
crossed.
because you predicted Lewis victory.
I did.
Who knows? It could well happen. Not going to rule it out at this particular stage. I've gone from a McLaren 1-2 with Lando leading the way and Lewis third. So I'm really hoping that comes to fruition, because that would be a super haul of points. But yes, anyway, on the serious side of matters, yes, Ferrari, they're definitely in the mix coming out of Friday, going into qualifying on Saturday, and at this stage, looking reasonably good as well for the Grand Prix on Sunday.
McLaren in the mix, Ferrari in the mix, Red Bull, well, who knows? Max Verstappen, a really difficult opening day in Silverstone, ending 5th on the timesheets, complaining of just the overall handling of the RB21. Christian Horner said after FP2 that Max was losing 90% of his lap time to Lando Norris just through turns 6 and 7, which is Brooklands and Luffield. Remarkable stuff how difficult the RB21 has proven to be in the middle sector. However, we have said this so many times on Fridays. What is going on with Red Bull? They then produce some overnight magic going into Saturday, and long behold, Max is fighting for pole. You can't rule him out, can you?
So now, then, if the Christian is saying that, of course, if they know exactly what the problem or where the problem area is, you would assume that Red Bull might be able to dial a little bit of that out going into qualifying, and they should be able to get Max into the equation going into qualifying. As we saw, half a second down at the end of FP2. That's a big gap, but nevertheless, we've seen previously over the course of this season that when things have been a little bit tricky for Max on a Friday, Red Bull has worked wonders going into Saturday. They've given him a reasonable car, and then Max, in a reasonable car, has been able to do his stuff, perform his magic, and thrust himself into the equation. I'm not, as you said, Nick, neither am I. I'm not going to rule him out either. I fully expect Max to be taking the fight to a certain extent. Helmut Marko spoke to him afterwards, after FP2. He's also of the thinking that Max, with a little bit of overnight work from the team and a little bit of Max at the helm of that RB21, then yes, he will be in consideration going into qualifying on Saturday.
To quickly run through the top 10 from the opening day, it was Lando Norris on top of the timesheets ahead of Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton in 3rd, Oscar Piastri in 4th, Verstappen 5th, Kimi Antonelli, the top Mercedes in 6th, Lance Stroll in a brilliant 7th for Aston Martin, George Russell in 8th, Isaac Hadjar in 9th, Liam Lawson 10th, and a quick mention that Yuki Tsunoda, who to his defence only drove in FP2 due to Arvid Lindblad driving in FP1. Yuki ended 15th on the timesheet, so perhaps maybe needs a bit more time to settle into the car at Silverstone. But Ian, perhaps the most confusing team today was Mercedes, as I've just mentioned, 6th and 8th on the timesheets. Kimi, the top Mercedes as well. The funny thing, isn't it, about Silverstone this weekend is that despite the blustery conditions, Friday is, or today, the hottest day at the circuit for this Grand Prix weekend. It's going to get cooler. Maybe rain, maybe not. The forecast is changing quite a bit. Looks like a less chance of rain now going into the weekend. But nevertheless, things can change. But nevertheless, it's weird for Mercedes, isn't it? Because the hot conditions clearly today not work for them. But as we know, when the conditions do drop, their car does come alive.
In all fairness, it wasn't that hot. And the reason being was that wind. It was due to that wind. It was having quite an effect on the temperature. Yes, it was warm. It was nice and pleasant if you're out in the sunshine. But as I say, that wind just having that little bit of an effect, causing a little bit of a drop in temperature. However, as you pointed out, we are due for a completely cloudy weekend. At this stage, there is not a drop of sunshine in sight for Saturday and Sunday. Rain also, I'm just going to refer to the Met Office. Hello, Met Office. Giving them a little bit of a plug. No rain in sight as well. So we're looking for quite cool temperatures. We're talking low 20s. And if there's going to be a degree of wind coming into the equation as well, then we can expect somewhere around the high teens. Those temperatures should play into Mercedes' hands. It all then comes down to how good will that Mercedes be given the windy conditions, if we are going to see a repeat over the weekend as we've seen on Friday today. So like Max Verstappen, I'm not going to rule Mercedes out of the equation either, because if they can hook up this car in these temperatures, which will most definitely suit that W16, then they will also be a little bit of a threat towards McLaren and Ferrari. It could be anybody's. McLaren most definitely has the car for this circuit. I'm fully expecting an all McLaren front row, in all honesty with you, Nick, and in all honesty with your viewers and listeners. But as I say, a lot could come into play. There's different factors going to come into the equation going into qualifying. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the guy that has that mistake-free lap that's going to land that pole position.
I'm still not going to rule out rain. It's Silverstone, it's England. I mean, if it's cloudy, who knows what's going to happen. Right, we've gone through everything on track very quickly. Got to discuss a topic off track, which has come up a little bit, it's fair to say, the last couple of weeks. Max Verstappen to Mercedes. Is it happening? Is it not? We had none other than Red Bull team principal Christian Horner in the team principal's press conference today. And, well, somebody, Ian, it was you, asked Christian a rather interesting question. A very straight question to Christian. Is Max Verstappen racing for Red Bull in 2026? Well, it was an interesting answer.
Sometimes you just have to ask the most straightforward questions. And the reason why I'd ask that is simply based on the fact that over the past 2 Thursdays, leading into Austria, leading into here, Max has also been asked very directly, are you going to be at Red Bull in 2026? And in all honesty, his answers have been quite fudge-like. He's not given really anything away. And he's not, as I put it to Christian, he's not nailed his colours to the Red Bull mast. So, direct to Christian, is Max going to be a Red Bull driver in 2026? And of course, Christian couldn't really answer because, as he pointed out, there are performance indicators in Max's contract that, of course, has opened this whole scenario with Red Bull speaking to Max's advisors, Raymond Vermeulen, his manager, of course, being the most prominent figure. So at this stage, yes, this is why we're having all this debate, all this conjecture. And I know that, this goes to show that I do read the comments below our videos, folks. There was somebody that posted below Thursday's video, our update on Thursday. Oh, good grief, guys. FFS, why on earth are you talking about all this constant speculation? This is the 15th video in which you've done that. Maybe not quite, but probably close in all honesty.
Not far off, yeah.
Not far off. But we're only talking about it because it's out there in the public domain. When you've got guys like Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, Raymond Vermeulen, who also commented today, by the way, folks, and obviously Max himself giving answers, Toto Wolff giving answers, then naturally it is a topic what people want to know. So we're only talking and discussing about the various points that are being raised with the drivers. And if this topic is in the public domain through various people talking about it, if it's not being flattened in its entirety, and anybody coming out and say, Max Verstappen is at Red Bull next year. Christian could have said that. He didn't. Max Verstappen himself could have turned around and said, I'm going to be a Red Bull driver in 2026. He hasn't done that. So therefore, you get this constant speculation, and that's why Nick and I are talking about it. It's the only reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing so. So Christian today, obviously, likewise, as with Max, unable to categorically state that Max will be a Red Bull driver in 2026. The debate goes on, the speculation will continue until at some point somebody turns around and says, either Max himself, or Christian, or Helmut, or Raymond Vermeulen, or Toto Wolff by saying they're no longer interested, until we get to the point where Max or anybody is saying Max is at Red Bull in 2026. This will only continue.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Ian, amazing stuff. As always, for those who've been watching this video, please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure, please, to join Ian and myself after qualifying on Saturday. I think it's going to be a good one. See you later.
I agree. Take care as always, folks. Thanks for watching and listening.